What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a video on how to beat SPYRAL. Now the thing is, when it comes to SPYRAL, wait a minute. Haven't we done this before? Hold on.
Oh shit, here we go again.
What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you a video on how to beat SPYRAL in 2020. Now this video came up for a few reasons. The first reason was because we just had the Pro Play Tour Invitational take place this past weekend, and SPYRAL was the breakout deck and is looking to be the deck to beat moving into the January 2020 format. If you want to check out the meta analysis I did yesterday covering that event, I will have that video up for you there. And as a result of that, a bunch of people started flocking to YouTube looking up ways to beat SPYRAL, found my old video from about 2 years ago, because I think SPYRAL was last played in 2017, at least at like the tier 1 status, and that video is slightly outdated, so I thought I'd go ahead and make you a more updated version of tips, tricks, and card selections that you can take into any event to combat what is looking to be the strongest deck of the current format. Now, before we get into it, I do want to let you guys know there's only a couple days left to get your max rarity foil shirts. If you guys are still interested in picking those up, they're only a limited edition run, and once January ends, you won't be able to get them any longer. Teespring is very limited with these types of prints, so be sure to pick yours up if you haven't already by clicking the link down below. I'll have a link, I think, up in the top right corner as well. And thank you guys again so much for your continued support with all of the merch. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. I want to go ahead and break this video up, as I do with all of my how to beat videos, into different chunks, I guess you could say, in terms of card type. Now, the first card type I want to start with is hand traps. One of the biggest differences when it comes to hand traps of SPYRAL of the old age versus the new is that the hand traps that you might traditionally expected to have worked against SPYRAL don't really do as much as they used to. SPYRAL has definitely taken on a new modern evolution, and as a result of power creep and all these different things, those older hand traps that we used to use against SPYRAL don't have the same potency as they do against the modern SPYRAL decks. You can still use them, sure, cards like Ash Blossom and Ghost Ogre, things like that, but again, it's not as powerful now because the deck isn't necessarily as reliant on Double Helix as it was in the past. Double Helix is still a very powerful card for what it is worth. However, it isn't like the central focal point of the deck. You're still able to assemble amazingly powerful boards without it, and the thing is, you definitely need to find ways to either just completely deter your opponent from even getting that far when it comes to building their board, or have a card powerful enough to stop it in the process. So the first card I want to talk about is Droll and Lockbird. This hasn't changed from the old video. When it comes to Droll and Lockbird, this has been pretty much the go-to option. For instance, at the Pro Play Tour last weekend, pretty much every non-combo deck for the most part was main decking 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. Some SPYRAL players were even opting to main deck Droll and Lockbird, and if they weren't playing it in the main deck, it was in the side deck. So Droll and Lockbird was everywhere, and it's good because it shuts down SPYRAL's ability to search. That's one of the big weaknesses of this deck. It's also one of its biggest strengths, is that it's able to search so much over the course of a turn to continuously generate you resources that you can just vomit out onto the board to essentially assemble your ultimate god board, which is comprised of a SPYRAL Sleeper equipped with a Last Resort, and then you have a Tri-Gate Wizard co-linked to an Appaloosa with multiple negations, a Nightmare Phoenix to protect everything from battle, and then either a SPYRAL Double Helix, or if you have an extra extender, a Nightmare Cerberus to protect everything co-linked from being destroyed by card effects. So seems pretty good, but again, it is not unbeatable. Droll and Lockbird, as soon as your opponent uses anything, can pretty much just end the SPYRAL player's turn immediately, and depending on the type of deck that you're playing, maybe you're playing like a going second oriented deck that can just OTK through basically anything, or if your deck is good enough to just establish a board once you've drolled them, so that way you have some form of interaction for when they start comboing off again on the following turn, then you should be pretty set, and Droll and Lockbird is going to pay off in dividends. So definitely a solid pickup, and probably pretty much the best investment in terms of a hand trap that you could probably ask for. Another very powerful hand trap is Gamma. Now, when it comes to Psyframe Gear Gamma, it's a little bit more limited in its application simply due to the fact that you have to run an engine piece being Psyframe Driver in your main deck. Now, this is very hit or miss because there are times where you are going to draw that driver, and it's going to, even though it might not be a brick, quick, it's just going to be a card you don't necessarily want to see in your hand. Also, Cypher Gear Gamma can't be used if you control monsters in on your field unless you're playing Lambda, which, to be fair, some decks are. There's the Danger Lunalight deck profile that Noah Bagelman played and made top 16 with, which you can check out that deck profile as well. Gamma's really good, though, for the reason that it not only negates the effect of whatever you are using the Gamma on, but it also destroys the monster. This is why this card has one step up over, say, something like Ash Blossom, for example, because Ash Blossom just negates the effect of, say, something like Double Helix, where Gamma clears it from the field as well. And why that's so pertinent is because then the opponent either has to waste an extender to get that Double Helix back, or they don't have that link to monster to continuously link climb into their other plays. It's very important to kind of remove those threats, because if you're able to prevent them from having that link material, then it's going to be more difficult for them to assemble the board that they are attempting to assemble. So that's one of the reasons why Gamma is so powerful. Gamma saw a ton of play back in the original Spiral format, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it makes a comeback. Another card I want to talk about is Nibiru, the Primal Being. Now, Nibiru is a bit of a weird one because there are certain instances when you are playing against Spiral that if you don't Nibiru at the correct moment, it actually doesn't matter if you Nibiru them, and they can actually play through it just because of the sheer amount of card advantage that a deck like Spiral is able to amass. And at the same time, at the very least, they might still be able to end on something like Sleeper, which is still a pretty threatening card. Nibiru is a bit of a weird one. Yes, it can be a huge payoff in the right instances. I think probably Nibiru is good for like maybe the average or slightly above average hands, but the problem is, I mean, is that good enough? Nibiru, yes, it can clear all the threats, but if there are going to be multiple instances where they can play through it, it's something that you're going to have to experiment with and find those choke points where Nibiru is the best. The other issue is with a card like Appaloosa that Spiral does go into, there's a certain point that if you do not use the Nibiru, that window of opportunity closes and Nibiru will be a dead card in your hand. So something to consider, but it was a tool we did not have in 2017 and something that was definitely worth mentioning. Now, the next category of cards are the Kaijus. Now, when I'm talking about Kaijus, I'm not specifically just talking about Kaijus. I'm talking about any card that can tribute over an opponent's monster, isn't like an activated effect, and can just clear threats with ease. So I will start with Kaijus. Kaijus tribute over one monster, and this can be good for a few reasons. First off, you can use a Kaiju to tribute over something like Spiral Sleeper, which is a very big deal because when it's equipped with Last Resort, it can't be targeted, it can't be destroyed, and it basically is immune to almost everything. So just slapping a Kaiju over the Sleeper can deal with that immediately. Another powerful application is to use it on Appaloosa, and the reason why that's so good is because not only do you get rid of the Appaloosa from the field, but you also disable the Tri-Gate because it's no longer co-linked to 3 separate monsters. So you almost get like a 2-for-1 there, and that is pretty strong. Now, the next level up from this would be playing a card like Lava Golem. Now, Lava Golem's weird because only certain decks are able to play it because it does eat your normal summon. So if your deck does nothing but special summon, then you don't really have to worry about it. But Lava Golem's a really nice option because not only does it remove one threat, it removes 2. So in theory, you can go ahead and drop the Lava Golem over your opponent's Sleeper and their Appaloosa that disables the Tri-Gate Wizard as well, and essentially, they're really not going to have much of a board to be working with. Sure, the co-link of the Phoenix and the Tri-Gate Wizard will still be there, but that should be pretty easy to clear with any sort of destructive effect. Now, Lava Golem is a big boy. He is 3000 attack. He will burn your opponent, which for time could be relevant at the competitive level, but do bear in mind, again, he does eat your normal summon, so that's something you definitely have to consider. And then if we're going one up from that, we have Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode. Now, just as Lava Golem eats 2 monsters, Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode tributes over 3. So you can get rid of a 3rd monster in addition to that, and it just helps you clean up the board a lot easier. Again, it does eat your normal summon, so do bear that in mind. That's going to maybe take up the majority of your turn depending on what deck that you're playing. However, once that board gets broken, it's going to be difficult for them to recover since they're not all in on it, but they do have some recovery plays, but it's going to be difficult for them to win if they lose essentially all of their best cards in those instances. And if you're able to set up and ensure that you at least have some form of interaction after you drop any of these cards, you should be pretty set from there. Now I want to talk about some going first options. First up is Abyss Dweller, and this is a card that a lot of people might not think of right off the bat, but when it comes to Dweller, it's actually pretty nice because there is a lot of graveyard reliance experience when it comes to Spiral, because you've got cards like Master Plan, you've got Quick Fix, you've got the Rescues, you have a lot of stuff that triggers in the graveyard, and if Dweller shuts that down, it's definitely difficult for your opponent to be able to build the board that Spiral does. So if you're playing any sort of rank 4 deck, like let's say, you know, again, the Danger Lunalight deck comes to mind because that deck can make rank 4s with ease, ending on a Dweller on your turn 1 is actually very strong, and it's difficult for your opponent to deal with because it is a lingering effect. Then we have a few options coming out of the side deck. I mean, you could opt to main deck these, but I don't think it's probably wise just considering how the meta is shaping up. First up though is Artifact Sanctum in tandem with Artifact Scythe. Spiral is in fact an extra deck reliant deck, and if you just drop the Sanctum on them and activate that Scythe, there isn't really a whole lot they can do. Yeah, they still have monsters that have activated effects like Tough and Agent, but I mean, Scythe's effect, again, similar to Abyss Dweller, is going to linger, and they're not really going to have much they can do during their turn. So then depending on what deck that you're playing, you can either OTK them or just further establish your own board to make it even more difficult for the Spiral player to win. And then another one is Different Dimension Ground. Now again, like I said before, it can be a graveyard reliant deck, and just being able to banish all of those cards that would be sent to the graveyard, like Master Plan, Quick Fix, everything that you want to have in the graveyard, everything gets banished, your opponent's not really going to have a lot to work with. It blanks a lot of their cards like Big Red and Monster Reborn, so on and so on, and that could be a path to victory. And then last but not least, we have some going second options, again, most likely coming out of the side deck, but you could opt to main deck these if you really want to. First up, in a similar line to Different Dimension Ground, I've actually got Dimension Shifter. Now again, this is a very specific application because it does depend on the deck that you're playing, but similar to Different Dimension Ground, except when you're going second, you know, you just drop the Dimension Shifter and we have Macrocosmos for the next couple of turns. Anything your opponent does is not going to go to the graveyard, it's going to get banished, and it pretty much blanks the entire deck. So for all the reasons I said Different Dimension Ground is good, Dimension Shifter is also good, but you can use it on your turn 0 when your opponent is opting to go first. So again, I think that's pretty solid. I think the biggest issue with Dimension Shifter is that it can be a dead draw anytime after turn 1, and I think that's why a lot of people hesitate to use it. But again, depending on the deck that you're playing or maybe your budget, Dimension Shifter isn't the worst option. Then we have Dark Ruler No More. Now this is very powerful simply due to the fact that the Spiral board, as powerful as it is, aside from Tri-Gate Wizard, doesn't really have a lot of interaction when it comes to the spell and trap department, not to mention that Dark Ruler No More makes it so that your opponent cannot really respond with their monster effects, so it doesn't matter anyway. However, when it comes to Dark Ruler No More, it just shuts down all of their monster effects, and then if you're playing a deck that can easily break boards by just destroying the monsters, Sleeper can still be a little bit difficult to deal with, but other than that, you should be able to make quick work of their board. And then last but not least, we have the ultimate equalizer for the last several years, Evenly Matched. Now again, when it comes to Evenly Matched, you do have to worry about the Tri-Gate Wizard being on the field, but if you can find a way to bait that out, you can just drop Evenly, everything will get banished. Most likely they're going to keep their Spiral Sleeper because Sleeper is still a form of interaction that they can deal with. Some instances they might keep Appaloosa, but I think Sleeper is more common than Appaloosa. It obviously does depend on the matchup, but when it comes down to it, if you could find a way to then deal with the Sleeper, which shouldn't be too difficult considering Last Resort gets banished off of the Evenly Matched, you are going to be in a very powerful and most likely winning position. So guys, that's gonna go ahead and wrap up my video on how to beat Spiral in 2020. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about your favorite cards and options for beating this new Spiral variant. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.